This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. Planning is everything. We know that in life, and definitely planning for the future, especially your finances and where you want them to go if you're not here. I know it's sometimes uncomfortable to ponder that, but it is reality and it is planning. And what about planning not just for your immediate family, but onward from that, your legacy, the legacy you leave, even financially? We're going to start there with an amazing estate attorney, and she's given us so much insight from the basics to the complicated aspects of it. Now we're going to look at the layers of the legacy with Julie Schejbal, who's back on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Steve. How about yourself?
Good. And this word legacy resonates because I have a friend. His name is Lantigua. That's his last name. And he calls it the Lantigua legacy. And his main goal is to leave a legacy, the connections with his kids and onward. And now I'm seeing this a little bit deeper when we talk about the layers that are involved when it comes to estate planning. What are the starting points if you want to preserve your legacy? And I'm talking now, apparently this is your whole family, right?
Right. So I think we're to start with maybe sort of set the path of what it kind of looks like. So
Sure.
In that typical family, you have, maybe you're looking at the grandparents and, they're the head of the snake or the head of the tip of the spear or whatever. And they're starting to do their planning, but they're at a point in time in their life, they've been successful. And then they're looking at their children, and their children are, also maybe they're ready to become grandparents or ready to retire, and they've been successful. So that necessarily when the grandparents die and goes down to their children, the children don't necessarily need the money. They're in a place where they've done well on their own. And then they can consider, sometimes the grandparents will consider, okay, instead of leaving it all to my children, I will either skip them entirely and leave all of my wealth to my grandchildren, to the second generation, or I'll leave a portion of it, I'll give some to my kids, some to my grandchildren. And so that it's sort of that layered idea of planning and thinking about it from the global standpoint of the family, that I know my kids have done well, maybe they don't need it, or maybe the kids have come to their parents and said, look, mom and dad, we're really well off. We would rather you drop it to our grandchildren, our children, our grandchildren, or maybe your great grandchildren.
Do you find that many times it's a little uncomfortable to have that conversation, or is it easier than I view it to be?
Well, I think it depends. Like a lot of times, I think that entree comes from the client, like the grandchildren. If I'm looking at the grandparents, the first generation, they may say, "Hey, my kids are really well off. They don't really need the money," or maybe not all the kids. Maybe it's one child has done really well, and the other two aren't necessarily struggling, but they're not as fabulously well off as the other kid. And then we start looking at, okay, well, maybe we'll start thinking about bringing the grandchildren into this plan. And sometimes it's also driven from the children, where the children have gone to mom and dad and said, hey, we're looking at our plan. And I don't know what you're doing with your money, but we talked to our attorney or our financial planner. We don't think we need the money. Think about dropping it to the grandchildren, to our children.
Now, what if you're in a situation, either you're a grandparent or you're a parent, and this is actually a friend, I hear what he shares, and
right.
He's got 3 kids. 2 of them are doing great, all good. There's one that not so great, just makes poor choices, just kind of stumbling through life, just hasn't found his way apparently.
Right.
How do you handle that? And I know this is a very personal decision to make, but if he came to you with that and said, well, I'd like to give it some to that child that's not doing well, but I don't want to enable them. But then again, my other kids are doing fine. of course, they could use it, but they don't really need it. But I'm not really sure what to do. If somebody came to you with that, how would you help them? You're like a therapist. This is what you know what? You know
And
what?
sometimes it is, or like a bartender without, unfortunately, it's a bartender without the beer on tap or the liquor behind me that I can, you
Sure.
know, partake in after that particular difficult conversation. But
Hmm.
well, I first start with the idea of I believe in equal but unequal treatment. So what I kind of mean by that is that, you have your friend has these three kids. And if you start out wanting to treat them equally, you can say, all right, I'm going to divide the pie of money equally among the kids. But this other kid who hasn't found their way yet, instead of saying, let's give the money to him or her outright so that they have the money
Mm,
to make mistakes with, we can put it in trust for them so that somebody's managing the money for maybe a period of time or for their lifetime. So you've created a safety net for him or her. Same amount of money's going in, but it's just being handled in a different manner from the other siblings. I
mm.
think one thing though, Steve, with it is like some people will say, well, I think I need to treat, John, give him more money because he hasn't found his way. And I get concerned about it. And I understand those concerns, but those are really not only tough conversations to have, but it tends to, if part of your legacy is you hope that your children will get along when you die, that's maybe not putting gas on the fire, but it is creating a scenario for tension because the other two
Mm.
might say, well, first of all, everybody looks rightly or wrongly as whatever they get from mom and dad as sort of a testament to how much they were loved by their parents.
Yeah.
And so if you're not given as much, well, okay, mom and dad didn't love me as much. The other part of it is the other two might be saying, well, wait a minute, we did well on our own because we worked really hard and, did what we were supposed to do. And now we're being somewhat punished for doing the right thing. So I think that's kind of where you have to be cognizant of it and, concerned about like the tension that could possibly come.
And it goes both ways too, because somebody could say, and it's easier to just not have a will when you don't
Yeah,
want to make those choices. But then the
right.
flip side could be, well, if our parents really loved us, they would have planned ahead of time. Yeah, okay.
Well, exactly. I mean, that is like part of it is like, okay, if they'd planned, it would have been easier. Or you're looking at, again, you take the kid that's, maybe not found his way or struggling or whatever, then, and it could be struggling for a lot of different reasons.
Sure.
And, if he's struggling because they have a drug problem, now you're giving him money or gambling to just increase that problem.
Yes.
So, you know, there's various, lines on the continuum, I guess.
So let's talk about that for a second. Let's say in this scenario that, and we talk about layers. So what about a layered approach? And I personally, I would have to make it fair or equal to all three of those children, even though one
Right.
of them is struggling, but you don't want to enable. And, when I'm gone, here's everything. Could,
Exactly.
could there be a layered approach, almost like the faucet in your kitchen where it gets turned on at one point, some money comes out, and then it's closed. Then some time goes on, then it comes out again, then it goes. So at least you're not. It's not a lump sum going to that one child of yours that struggles. And I'm not minimizing anything, but they're
Right.
struggling for a reason. But
Right.
you also don't want them to. Here's everything when I go, and they buy sports cars and things like that, and don't work, and then the money's gone.
Right.
Is there a layered approach to that?
So you can do that. So you can typically you could say, okay, then we like to give out all of the income. So if there's $1 million in the trust that earns 5%, they get the 50,000 every year to do what they want. But then with the principal, that million, you can it's very flexible. So you could say basically it's going to come out at equal increments, maybe every 5 years. So they would get roughly a 20 of it, every fifth year, or you could say,
Hmm.
when they're, I mean, sometimes we're dealing with like parents with minor children, they say, well, half at 25, half at 30, or 30 and 35. And this time you could say, well, okay, he's going to get, um, I don't know, a third at 40, a third at 45, and the remaining third at 50 or something. You can do, or it all stays in trust and he doesn't get anything directly, but if he needs it, then we're going to turn on the spigot.
If he needs it, how would that be determined?
Well, it's sort of like, like, okay, does he need like sort of certain, we don't want to make sure that somebody's not homeless. So rent, uh, medical expenses, food and shelter, that type of thing. But then it could be broader than that. It could be, all right, needs a car. That's perfectly fine. But we're not getting him a Ferrari or a Tesla or something that's really high end. Let's go shop in the Toyota Ford aisle, so getting them what they need, but not like going hog wild, and within the parameters of not only their lifestyle, but what the trust would support. So maybe he wants a nice house, which is certainly, something we could entertain, but we're not going to entertain, a $10 million home
Mm.
on a $50,000 budget kind of thing.
Let's say, okay, before I ask that question,
Yeah.
you want to have it on autopilot. You don't want to rely on somebody to oversee the trust. And I'm saying this because maybe it would be uncomfortable where, Jimmy's looking, he's our cousin. He's not even, one of the kids. And now he's in charge of my money from my parent or parents. And I need money right now. So if you didn't do that, could it be set up so it's autopilot where you're not looking at somebody's financial situation? The child needs a car, needs this, whatever. You're not going to worry about that. They're going to get a certain amount of money on a payment schedule. Is there a way to set it up and then that it's just on autopilot?
Well, so you still would need a trustee to manage it, whether that's
okay. So you just answered. There you
yeah.
go. You answered it. There needs to be somebody to administer anything here. So
right, but certain times you can go to like what's called known as a corporate trustee. So that could be, a financial house like a bank or a brokerage house.
Okay.
They will, or a professional trustee. Sometimes go with an attorney or an accountant, and so you're taking the family out of it, because that is one of the harder things with the trust. Is not the idea of the trust a lot of people like, but it's who's going to manage it, and they don't if they're not, there's good and bad things about a corporate trustee. Good thing is they're very dispassionate. They're not part of the family.
Right.
But the bad thing is you do lose some of that flexibility that might be baked in with a family member, even if it's a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or something. Maybe not.
Which could be good or bad, because that one
right.
child, that has some financial struggles, could be hitting up, their aunts. I realize, you know what? I just lost my car, and now they're
right.
in an uncomfortable situation. So I guess they would have to be fair to the other children. All right, here's the deal. I'm going to give you $20K and your siblings $20K. And then we're going to go back to the guardrails on the plan, whatever it is.
Right. Well, and if they're going to do trust for all the kids, what I usually suggest is we do separate trusts. So we have a trust for, Winkin, Blinkin, and Nod. And then, because they're all going to bring different stresses to the table, so that you it's easier, I think, to be fair if it's different pots of money.
Gotcha. What else should we know when it comes to legacy planning?
Well, I think with it, part of it is like, you hear the word legacy and you think of millions and millions of dollars, and it could be very, very large sums of money. But again, you could go be looking at the family where, it's the grandparents are reasonably well off, but, it's their kids that are more well off. And so what we're dropping to the grandchildren isn't millions. It's, thousands or whatever. Or $1 million. It's not, it doesn't have to be necessarily, the equation isn't necessarily driven by the number behind the grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of legacy planning, I think, is maybe this is a little offshoot, is thinking about like assets that you have as a family that are part of your legacy. And the big one that comes to mind for me is a beach house or a vacation home or, something like that, because you're looking at, you have this house and it's full of memories because you guys spent, summer vacations at the beach or ski vacations, the Rockies or whatever. And now, maybe it was owned by the parents. And now you're looking at, okay, the next generation. And maybe it's not like, if everybody's good, like everybody lives, in Maryland, we have the Ocean City or the Delaware beaches. If everybody still lives in Maryland, they live close enough, they can all pretty much, assuming they all still like the beach, you know, go in with this. But what if some of the kids are now living in, Colorado or New York or
Mm, mm.
Texas or whatever? They're not going to get as much bang for their buck, or they've never been beach people. So it's sort of thinking of how we're going to structure that so that the legacy can continue if possible.
What a sticky one there, Julie. When you think about it, let's say they're 5 miles from the beach. They've had a beach house in the legacy in the family for
Right.
years. And some of the kids live in the Midwest. So unless they get on a plane and go to enjoy the beach house, it's kind of for naught. So then,
Right.
but then you have one that lives close by the parents. Maybe they took care of the parents more than the others. Just saying.
Right.
Add some layer of complexity to it. They
Yes.
love the beach. That house has so many memories. Now what do you do? It's
Well,
a
a
challenge.
couple of things you can do is you can start working through it with the planning, or some of it can be, um, pushed off. And this sounds like really not very lawyer-like, but when mom and dad die, because one of the things is there is some flexibility when you're administering the estate. So the one that lives close could say, hey, I would like the beach house. It makes sense. I'm here. My family's here. Going forward, we'd love it.
Right.
And then you can kind of look at, okay, well, we're dividing this pie up of money and assets, and your share of the pie is, say, $2 million. Well, conveniently in this example, the beach house is 2 million. We'll give you your share in bricks and mortar in the beach house, and everybody else walks away with cash. So
Right.
sometimes but there are other strategies that you can kind of employ to looking at what can be my legacy for this beach house or ski um, home or whatever.
Do you find yourself, you look at yourself as almost a problem solver?
Well, I think sometimes, and I think it's more, I don't know that I solve the problems, but I think what it is that after being experienced for a while, you see the problems and you see, either maybe you came up with a solution or you saw the problem and then you sort of say, okay, well, this would maybe been a better solution, sort of trial by error, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, but it's almost as if here's all the pieces of the puzzle, and your job is to show a client, all right, you can move the pieces like this, or you can move them like this. It's all up to the client's choice. Here's another option. You can move it this way. These are your options.
Right, exactly.
You decide what you want to do.
Exactly.
All right, we're talking with Julie Schejbal, who is an estate attorney, talking about legacies and planning for the future. We're going to push the pause button on legacy. Got some questions from our listeners.
Sure.
Can we go to those?
Perfect. Absolutely.
Okay. Instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com is how you reach us. This is Mike in Charlotte who says, I'm recently divorced and just remarried. How do I protect my new spouse while making sure my kids from my first marriage still inherit what I intended?
So I think one of the ways you can do that is in your estate plan is whatever you want to leave for the new spouse, whether it's half or all or whatever, is that you put in a trust for him or her so that they benefit from this money. The money is there, creates income for them. The principal can be used for medical expenses or maintaining standard of living. But when you die, this trust is irrevocable so that when she dies or he dies, whatever's left in the trust will go to funnel back to your kids. So you're kind of creating this pot of money that will work for the spouse, but he or she can't say, well, I never liked your kids. I'm going to give it to my kids or my alma mater or the church or whatever. So it kind of gives the surviving spouse, protection, but it doesn't ultimately support what would come to the kids.
Should you always, and thank you for that, should you always let your children or those involved know what your intention is? For example, let's say your kids are doing okay. What sparked this question is you said the alma mater church, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you want to give back to your community? You have an affinity for something, whatever it might be. You've made a decision. Lump sum is going there. That's your choice. It's
Absolutely.
that's it.
It's ultimately all your money.
Yes. And whether your kids are doing great or not, let's say they're all right, should you tell them, okay, guys, this is where I'm at. You're going to get this. However, I am willing, a substantial amount, whatever, to animal rescue, whatever it is.
Right.
In your experience, should you divulge that or let them find out when you pass?
So I guess because I'm sort of a privacy freak myself, is I'm more of I counsel don't tell them. And even when it's nothing controversial, Steve, even when you have 3 kids and it's all going a third, you have to select somebody who's going to minimally take care of your affairs after you die or when you've lost capacity. And, you got to pick someone. So you're going to pick one of your kids. It may be the oldest, it may be birth order, it may be the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kids are going to look at that and go, well, why didn't you pick me? How come I'm smarter than Julie or whatever,
Right.
So why,
Yeah.
and I've done this in a long time. Even when things are completely fair on the surface, somebody will try to get their nose will get bent out of shape, and they'll, pepper you with complaints. And why do you want to hear that while you're alive?
Thank you. Yes, and again, it's your decision. You may have reasons why you picked the child that doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
Because maybe they're more savvy with common sense. I don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Melissa's in Brooklyn, New York. She says, if someone is listening right now and has done absolutely no estate planning, what's the very first step they should take this week? I don't know if this is true, but maybe she's feeling that and doesn't want to admit, like, all right.
Okay. Well,
Either way, Melissa, we appreciate it. But maybe, this inspired and somebody's thinking, I'm going to do something, but I don't know where to start.
Well, so I think the first step will be to start finding a lawyer who can help you. And I think the way you can do that is if you have, a financial advisor or an accountant, or you can start, ask him or her, hey, do you have any, estate planning attorneys you work with? You can ask people that, if that doesn't work, you can ask, people in your circle, people at work, neighbors. If you're a younger parent, I think there's people often are in mom's clubs or stuff. I'm sure they've, somebody there has done this. So I would start with that. The next step I would do is make an appointment and, look at, maybe one interview, 2 or 3, or just one, but that would be what I would say to do.
Gotcha. I love your practical approach to all of this and your honesty and transparency. Even the second to last question there about, whether you should divulge what your plans are.
Right.
I kind of align with that. Why do you want to deal with that when you're alive?
Right. I mean, I don't know what happens when we die. I don't know if we can actually hear people here on Earth. I got no idea. I know we can hear while we're alive. So why put yourself through that?
Yeah. And by the way, I've side note, very pivotal here, to the side. Right. I've worked with some of the biggest psychics on the planet. I'm not a psychic connoisseur. It just came my way. I launched their media careers. You know the names if I say them, if you believe in that. And it's believed that when somebody passes, their energy is still around. And I've witnessed it when my mom passed 7 years ago.
Right.
That, I'll say things, I'll ask for things, I'll ask for signs, and I get them, and they're very specific. So I share that. Who knows? Nobody has that answer, though.
Unfortunately, I have to say some of your psychic friends, it's not that I believe or disbelieve, but there's some people who have really behaved badly after their parents have died, and apparently they haven't been able to whack them from beyond. So it's unfortunate.
You're Maryland. That's where you practice, right? How do we connect with you?
So you can reach me the easiest probably way is through my website, which is www.jasestate, it's ESTATE law.com.
Start with the conversation, and if somebody's not in Maryland but this resonates, would you take an email or a question?
Absolutely, they can give me an email, and if it's possible I've come across somebody in that jurisdiction that can help them, or I can certainly try to respond to their question.
Beautiful. Or like everybody's done today, Mike and everybody else, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. Bring on your questions. Yeah, we're here. Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate it. Good stuff.
You're welcome. You guys have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.